Hello and welcome to this week's webinar. My name's Nathan Batchelor and I'll be your host for today. Before we begin, just going to read through this disclaimer. Please feel free to read along as well. Beyond Trader LLC is strictly a research publishing firm. Information we publish is based on our opinions plus our quantitative models, statistical and financial data and independent research. Service is not registered with any financial regulatory agency such as the SEC or any other organization or governmental body. By using our platform or our services, you acknowledge that we do not provide personalized recommendation or advice. Alternative asset classes, volatile investments, and carry significant risk. Please do your own research before making any financial decisions. Okay, so on today's agenda, I'm going to be discussing short-term trend lines. Last week, I discussed long-term trend lines. So this week, I'm just going to be discussing the purpose of why we use short-term trend lines and the relevance to the market and the price action. And also, I'll be discussing, by choice, a few altcoins as well. Okay, so starting with short-term trend lines, the key considerations that you need to know about short-term trend lines. Short-term trend lines are only as good as the person drawing them, so that means that they're subjective, and how you draw them varies person to person, whether that be experience or how you visually see the chart. So all that, always bear that in mind. So how I draw a particular trend line, it might be different to how you'd draw those trend lines as well. So that's something that we should consider in our short-term analysis. Last week, when I discussed long-term analysis, it was very different in that I'm just looking at the short-term movements here, but over the long term, I'm looking at the bigger picture over maybe 3 to 6 months. But over here, I guess I'm looking on the short-term trend lines of the 4-hour chart, maybe about, I don't know, a month away best. So on the drawing of short-term trend lines, we should be solely focused on the daily and the weekly trading action. So if I was to look at a chart of Bitcoin now, how would I attack that if I was drawing trend lines? So I think the best thing for me to explain here would be the sequence of events that could take place. So if I look at this particular trend line here, it's kind of attached to the highs and the swing highs on the chart. So if I was to break past this trend line here, and also there's dual resistance there, then I would probably say that the next most important trend line would be up there, close to 63,000, and then that would kind of make a reversal pattern there. And then if we failed there, then we move back down to those two trend lines. So in the short term, this is how we plot our support and resistance. And if I'm looking at the day and the week ahead, then I might start to look at the path ahead, exactly how high Bitcoin can go or exactly how low it can go. So in the worst case, the lowest it could go would be down here and taking out this trend line, and then this would invalidate the bullish setup here a lot. But in the bullish scenario, a break above 63,000, and then in the very bullish scenario, you can see here after we crashed and we came up, this is probably one of the most important swing areas there on the chart. So 67 would be the the very best that we could go to there. So the lower time frame, it holds the less weight in terms of importance, but we should obviously place a lot of importance in the short term, but not over the bigger picture. And again, its relevance also, we have to factor in momentum. So the market needs a lot of momentum to get to 63,000. So until we've broken above here, strategically, the risk is that we can still move to maybe 58 or 57. So that's how I'd incorporate this in the short term if the market is truly bullish. And again, another factor here, when looking about the relevance, I guess we need to look at the lower time frame. So previously, I've been looking at the 4-hour. Now I'm looking at the 1-hour. So if I was to move on the 1-hour all the way up there to around about 60,000, and I failed there, then there's the chances there, like I say, you move towards that 58 to 57,000 region, and I've found two parallel trend lines there. And if I break underneath there, I've already charted out the the short-term picture that 54,000 is probably the most important level. So the chances are, if I break underneath this channel, that's where we're going. And if we measure the channel here, say 56.5 to 61, the chances are if I break above this channel here, then we're going towards 63, which pretty much matches with the short-term picture. So you can see with the 1 and the 4 hour, you kind of build a picture. Even though it's not medium to long-term analysis, it kind of gives you an idea about what's going to happen in the week ahead. So that's generally what I'm looking at anyway. Another thing to look at short-term trend lines is they can be used not only for identifying support and resistance, but also targets, as I discussed earlier. So if we work on the principle that we're going to attach important swing highs and important swing lows here, we could also have a look at areas of extended resistance. So down here, you know, there's a decent looking candle there, and we attach it to there, and we can see we can build these extended support lines. And also with the red line there, we can see that that's a previous swing high before the market really crashed. If we attach it to there, then we've got a nice support area there around 59,000. So we can drill in these little less important short-term zones where theoretically the market should bounce from, or where they could trade in between in the short term. So that's something that also to look at. And I guess the 4 hour time frame is really as low as I would classify short term trend lines of importance. Like the 1 hour, it's very easy to break it. If you've got momentum in the 1 hour, it can go basically anywhere, but you want to stick with that 4 hour structure that I mentioned in the beginning if we are going to go on true short term analysis. So from there as well, I think something we want to also do is to finally observe an indicator, how this can be important as well. I think with trend lines alone, they give some indication of what's going on in the market. But I think if we add an indicator in there as well, it can be really useful for us. So I think if we do something like Ikimoku analysis or something like that, that could be pretty useful for us. And if we are to throw this into our analysis, we can also see how they line up to the trend line. So, for example, if I'm looking at this trend line here and how it's breaking out, then I think here we've got a buy signal, and also the market is trying to get up above this trend line as well. So we can combine indicators into these short-term trend line breakouts as well, and that could be really useful for our trading in the short term. So that's basically a bit of a sum up about how we can use short-term trend lines. And last week you caught my webinar on how we can use long-term trend lines in the market as well. So now I'm going to look at Ripple by special request from last week. And one of the reasons why I'm looking at Ripple is because it's having an important breakout, or potentially going to have an important breakout on the charts. So how could we use what I've just showed you earlier in terms of trend lines and what to use and everything like that? So if we have a look here, the former rebound high there, and the former kind of nearest rebound low, and we've attached that, and that's what the market's using as support. And the breakout region is basically here, this yellow line, because that's the highest point of the high. So we know next week 0.56 is the short-term breakout zone. If we have a look at what it looks like here, we've used a slightly different trend line analysis, maybe a different chart. So maybe we're looking at 0.57 as well on the 4 hour time frame, just to look a little bit differently. What does that look like with the Ikimoku analysis? Ikimoku analysis is showing us a couple of things here. If we break above that high, then the future, I guess, resistance is coming in at 64, and we've got this area here that the market's testing, which coincided with our trend line earlier. So that's how we can combine that. But interestingly as well, on the longer term picture that I discussed last week, that we're very close to a breakout on the monthly, and if we kind of break out on the monthly here, then we're going to go towards 1 cent. So it could be quite interesting to have a look at Ripple over the next couple of weeks and where that's going to. Having a look at Ethereum and the trend line analysis that we discussed earlier, Um, you can see here that we're close to the edges in terms of this structure. Note the structure has got this kind of like expanding, broadening wedge pattern, and that's kind of alluding to the fact that we're going to have a big breakout, because when you're expanding in both directions, when it breaks out of that expanded range, then we know that we can probably explode quite a lot higher. So this is kind of saying around 3.5, 3.6 in the short term. And if we fail here, then we could move down to 2.8 or 2.7 or that kind of area. Um, Bearing in mind what I said earlier, we can see this nice trend line here that is coinciding in with my target of 3.5 in the short term, and also extended resistance around about 3.3. And you can clearly see that wedge there, and you can see the extension. So maybe we can creep up towards there, and if we break up towards that area, then that's kind of the bigger picture for Ethereum. But that's again how I would use my analysis. And again, there's probably a bit of a breakout trend line there as well. If we test towards 3.5 and we break up there, we could probably go towards 4,000 quite easily. So that would be my weekly picture. What I'm looking for, if we get past maybe 3.3 next week and up to 3.5, if not, we kind of work within this range here. And once we break from it, then there'll be a large breakout. In terms of questions, do I think that we'll bounce back in JTE? I think next week everything will bounce back um, in the market. If Bitcoin goes towards 63,000, then everything's going to break out higher, and that's kind of what I've got for all coins at the moment. But if we fail where we are now, the whole market could sink quite a lot lower. But we'll have to see what happens next week. Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you again next week. Thank you very much.